And so, from Matthew 17, 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up on a high mountain by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. And his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. And suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 buildings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." And while he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." And when the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. I wanted to start this morning with that Epiphany story to recognize that Matthew has a contained gospel and is telling a narrative that all weaves together. It opens with the Magi and that star in the sky, but now in chapter 17, that incredible light, that signifying light, is now found in Jesus. Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up on the mountain, joined there by Elijah and Moses. Jesus becomes transfigured, and it uses all kinds of light imagery. His clothes become dazzling white. His face shone like the sun, and a bright cloud came overhead. The star that screamed to all creation that something unique was happening, was now shining in and through Jesus. There are many metaphors for God or the sacred: the other, the love, one, more, and even light. Thomas Merton sees a world that is absolutely transparent, and God is shining through it all the time. For Merton, God is light in the midst of our daily lives. Some people like to keep God in a box. God is a person who is like us, only bigger and better and more powerful than us. But Dag Hammarskjöld said, "God does not die on the day when we cease to believe in a personal deity, but we die on the day when our lives cease to be illumined by the steady radiance, renewed daily, of a wonder, the source of which is beyond all reason." What we need are glimpses of that reality to sustain us on the journey. Jesus didn't stay transfigured, didn't stay shining. Peter, James, and John just got a glimpse and needed to hang on to that glimpse when they came back down the mountain. And did you notice in the story there's no women? Jesus clearly had women followers, many of them financial supporters of his ministry. But on that mountain we have Jesus, Peter, James, and John, joined by Moses and Elijah. A whole lot of testosterone up there on that mountain. And I think that's interesting because often the women I know are better at catching glimpses of the sacred. Catherine Matthews reminds us of the sustaining faithfulness of women in the Bible. Women were at the empty tomb, at the foot of the cross, in the kitchen and at Jesus' feet in the story of Mary and Martha, and alert to the crisis of a wine shortage at a wedding feast in Cana. Women also danced when the seas parted for the people of Israel to escape the Egyptians, covertly helped the Israelite spies before the Battle of Jericho, hid the Hebrew babies from Pharaoh's murderous intent, and like Ruth and Naomi, they've quietly taken care of one another within one patriarchal setting after another. But taken up on top of the mountain for one of those transcendent experiences of God, not so much. Looking back on my own journey and my own spiritual story, 3 different times in my life I have had someone tell me that they saw a light in me or an aura around me. And in all 3 of those instances, it was a woman. who identified something. Glimpses. Annie Lamont describes it as a radiance that dwells within each one of us, which gives us perhaps a taste of God's presence. In Matthew's gospel, between the star in chapter 2 and the transfiguration in chapter 17, in chapter 5, Jesus says, "You are the light. You are the light of the world." Jesus, who was transfigured and shining, is the Son of God who is light, but Jesus reminds us that we all are children of God, made to shine. How amazing would it be if we could see that light in ourselves and in one another? If we could see that light in other people, even those who shine a little bit differently than we do. And take a small detour here to reflect on the work of Stephen Patterson. Stephen Patterson is the head of religious and ethical studies at Willamette University. Stephen has a different take on the transfiguration story that we've all heard many times, and who knows how many times I've preached on that story. He says the Greek word for what happened to Jesus is metamorphone, which means to morph into something. Jesus morphed into the image of God, which is very bright and, well, the Jewish idea from Genesis chapter 1 is that God created humanity, imago Dei, in the image of God, male and female. We usually take this to mean that God created males in the image of God and God created females in the image of God. Therefore, both are equal in that way. But the Jewish understanding has tended to say that God is male and female. Thus, to be in the image of God is to be androgynous. Professor Patterson suggests we call Transfiguration Sunday Trans Sunday in honor of transgendered persons. Now, that may be a new pill to swallow. Those who transgress gender roles are rarely understood, much less celebrated. The Bible raises interesting gender ideas itself. In Mark 12, Jesus says that in the resurrection, people will not be married, will have become like the angels, often portrayed as creatures without gender at all. In Galatians 3, we have Paul's marvelous words, "For in Christ Jesus you are all children of God through faith. As many of you were baptized into Christ, have clothed yourselves with Christ. There's no longer Jew or Greek. There's no longer slave or free. There is no longer male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." No longer male and female. The boxes have been removed. Of course, Paul still had his issues. As much as he got it right in Galatians 3, he got it wrong in 1 Corinthians 11, in my humble opinion. Bumbling through how Christ is the head of every man and the husband is the head of his wife. Plus, it's a great disgrace if a man covers his head when he prays, and a disgrace if a woman prays without wearing a veil. I wonder if that idea had really stuck around, if wearing a hijab would have been the norm for Christians as well as Muslims. Anyway, in the midst of Paul's ramblings in verses 13 to 16, you get the sense that the church in Corinth, that there was something strange that was happening. Men with long hair were praying right next to women with long hair and no veils in such a way that it was hard to tell the two of them apart. Then in Matthew 19, Jesus is talking about marriage and divorce and says there are some who castrate themselves for the sake of the kingdom. Can anyone say eunuchs for Christ? Okay, so a little bit off the detour now. The point is, whether you present as male or female or neither or somewhere on the continuum, you are created in the image of God. So whether others understand you or even if you don't yet understand yourself, you are imago Dei nonetheless. We are all like singular embers, often gray and ashen, but when the breath of God stirs, we come to life with a glow and a warmth. There is a light, a fire within us. The secret of life is discovering that your light is one and the same to that eternal light, which radiates through you and all of existence. When you wish upon a star, may our wishes come true as we gather at the table this morning.